Go ahead, everyone. Shadowita here, one angry pagan. Let me know which one I should go with. And please like, subscribe and comment before I start. Right, this is been a couple of weeks since I've done a long video like this. Apart from obviously the Mick Lynch video. This one is Sophie Ridge on Sunday for today, right? Quite interested by this. Not just the fact that Keir Starmer's on it, but it's this whole Westminster pay stuff that SkyNews and Tortoise Media are doing. That is really interesting. So I'm gonna give it a look, give it a react. Let us know what you think. This is probably gonna get a little bit loud, depending on what happens. And yes, I will give an unbiased response to what Keir Starmer has to say. I'm not just a Starmer stooge. But my main point of interest on this one is literally more to do with this with what Sam Coates and Tortoise Media are doing. That I find really bloody interesting. So that's what we're going to have a look at today.
Hello and welcome to Sophie Ridge on Sunday. I think it's just about okay to still be saying Happy New Year at this point, and we've got a very special programme to start 2023 because we're going to be bringing you the exclusive first look at a special Sky News investigation into the money that MPs get from donations, gifts and outside earnings that's been 10 months in the making.
Yeah, this is what I wanted to.
It shines a light on money in Westminster and poses important questions about influence in our politics. And we'll also bring you an exclusive interview with a man that all the polls say will be the next Prime Minister of this country. So in just a moment, we're going to bring you that exclusive report. And then we'll speak live to the man who wants to be the next Prime Minister. And if the polls are correct, he will be. That is the Labour leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer. With the NHS facing unprecedented challenges from nurse and doctor strikes to huge backlogs and emergency care seemingly on the brink of collapse. For the government, we'll be joined by Health Minister and nurse herself, Maria Caulfield. And we'll try and find out just how bad things really are on the front line of the NHS with the President of the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, Dr. Adrian Boyle, who met the Prime Minister at number 10 just yesterday. Now, for generations, MPs have wrestled with the relationship between money and politics. There's been scandals over lobbying and cash for questions, calls for a ban on second jobs, but no agreement on what to do. But today, Sky News can reveal for the first time just how much extra money is still flowing into Westminster, who it goes to and where it comes from. In a major project with Tortoise Media, we compiled a comprehensive database that shows how much MPs really earn, the value of the gifts they're given, and the full scale of donations to individuals and also political parties. The Westminster
I do wonder at the potential for this.
Accounts draws together information from several public sources and for the first time makes it all available to the public in one place. So over the course of this week, we're going to have special reports built on what the database now reveals, including just how much MPs take home. And it also shows that since the last election, that was in 2019, they've earned £17.1 million on top of their regular salaries, with around 2/3 of that money going to just 20 MPs. Now, all of this work, it should be said, is legal. Most of the biggest earners are Conservatives, led by two former Prime Ministers. Our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, has this exclusive report.
Who funds our politics and our politicians? It's a question that's hung over Westminster for generations.
Shouldn't MPs be banned from having second jobs?
Duck houses and moats. You couldn't make it up.
And one that's never been easy to answer.
Enough is enough.
We know the rules were broken.
Money and scandal have long been part of the fabric of our politics.
I wouldn't hesitate to do it again tomorrow.
But once they're over, the answer is always the same.
We are going to hold MPs to account. We need a totally transparent system.
Promise after promise of transparency, but little real progress. Until now, as we open Westminster's accounts and make them accessible to everyone.
That's it, the Westminster accounts.
Who is giving what to MPs? Which politicians earn the most? How does business try and get its way? We took data from Parliament records, the Register of Members' Financial Interests, and the Electoral Commission to present a fuller picture than ever before of outside earnings of second jobs, gifts and donations to MPs, as well as donations to political parties. For decades, all of this information was clouded in opaque language and filed away in dusty tomes in shelves in Westminster. Sky News and our partners, Tortoise Media, have been working to change that so we can all follow the flow of money through our political system, now turning thousands of confusing written entries into a database available at the touch of a button, allowing us to tell stories like we never could before. Like this. Over £17 million. That's the total amount of outside earnings that MPs have declared in the course of this Parliament, just 3 years, and is on top of their annual £84,000 salary. And this might be one reason why reform is so hard when a Tory government's in number 10. Of the 17 million, £50 million in...
So, I'm going to lay... He doesn't... he doesn't actually, list this out. So, I'm going to list this out for you. Conservatives, out of the 79 million, right? Conservatives take up 15.2 million of the 17 million. Labour take up 1.2 million. Liberal Democrats take up 171 grand. 171,000 grand. 171 grand. Yeah, I was right the first time. And SNP 149 grand. So this Tories really are fucking ringing it in.
Earnings made by MPs goes to Conservatives. Now, for the first time, we can sort MPs in order of what they make from second jobs and other outside earnings. This.
I just want to go back because it flicks by quite quickly.
£2.5 million. Like £1 in earnings made by MPs goes to Conservatives. Now, for the first time, we can sort MPs in order of what they make from second jobs.
So Ian Blackford's at near the bottom, £38,000 above. And even then, this is mostly Tories on this list. Douglas Ross is on 48, so he earns more than the former SNP Westminster figure. So that's hilarious.
That outsider.
Keir Starmer, 59,000 and 59,500 over
earnings.
Remember that 59,500. Chris Bryant earns 74.5. There's nearly 75 grand over what he gets, right? Compare that to Matt Hancock, 71, which is probably more now, to be fair.
This.
And it just gets Esther McVeigh, 81 grand.
Here is
Ian Duncan Smith, 105 grand. You got the odd Labour ones here, so there's Dan Jarvis, 106 grand, and Ed Miliband, 157 grand. Tim Lawton, Ian Grady,
the leaderboard.
Ed Davey is on 159 and three quarters thousands. So
These people.
one of the Leader of the Green, John Finnecane, is 161 grand. Jess Phillips 163 grand. But again, fuckload of Tories. Between Jess Phillips and David Lammy, you got Richard Fuller, Stephen Hammond, David Davies, Nadine Dorries, Stephen Partland, Dr. Dan Poulter, and that's just that's a range between David Lammy on 202,500 and Jess Phillips on 162. Right, again, from the other parties, it's just you see the odd ones through the list, and the majority of the people on this list earning money outside of politics are the Tories. I mean, yes, they are the largest party, but still.
Top 20.
Owen Patterson above David Lammy, 209 grand.
Made.
So from David Lammy upwards, right? It's David Lammy 202.5 grand, Owen Patterson 209 grand, Chris Grayling 224 grand, Sir Bill Wiggin 253 grand. Now this is where it jumps. Sir John Hayes 337,852. 337,852. Sajid Javid 358,017. Andrew Mitchell, another jump here by the way. Andrew Mitchell 657,796. This is pounds. John Redwood 692,438. Fiona Bruce is up at 711,749. Boris Johnson. Now this is again where we have another big jump. Boris Johnson 1,064,785 pounds. Sir Geoffrey Cox 2,191,387 pounds. What the fuck? And top to top the list, Theresa fucking May. What? Theresa May with 2,550,876 grand. Pounds. Sorry. That's just like what? Right. Apart from David Lammy, all MPs that earn over 200 grand are Tories. And even then, as I said, going back through the list, you can check it out yourself. The majority of Tories, you start seeing more Labour and Lib Dems and whatnot as you go further down the list on the lower end. So they're earning little bits, you know, for being in the media or, you know, being as a nurse or a doctor. But why the fuck is Boris Johnson getting $1 million? What? Why is Theresa May getting $2.5 million? What the fuck?
Close to 2/3 of all the outside earnings in this parliament. Again, it's dominated by Conservatives. 17 of the top 20 are Tory MPs. The person at the top of this list is familiar to everyone. It's former Prime Minister Theresa May, declaring over £2.5 million. Life post number 10 appears to have been treating.
I was nearly missed that then.
MPs in order of what they make from second jobs and other outside earnings. £2.5 million.
This is Theresa May. Structured finance assets, 115 grand. Dubai Women Establishment, 115 grand. Brown University, 115 grand. Eminent Series Group, 114 grand. Life Science and Diagnostics, 113 grand.
£1 million.
World 50 Inc., 109 grand. Danish Bar and Law Society, 109 grand. World Travel and Tourism Council, 107.5 grand. Apex Partners LLP, 97 grand. PricewaterhouseCoopers LLP, 96 grand.
Life post number 10 appears to have
Deutsche fucking Bank, fuck's sake, 74 grand. XP Eventos LTDA, 51.5 grand. The Richmond Forum, 48, just over 48 grand. Cuyahoga Community College, 46.5 grand. Why is the college giving her money? Surely she should be giving the college fucking money. Telmex Foundation, for, just over 46.5 grand.
been treating her
Guildford,
well.
again, colleges. Why are colleges giving this fucking woman money? She should be giving it money. Guildford College, just over 45.5 grand. Lancaster Church, what? Sorry. Lancaster COC and Industry, 45.5 grand. Amundi Asset Management, just under 40 grand. Society of the Four Arts, just over 38.5 grand. Pension Real Estate Association, just over 38 grand. MPSF, 38 grand. Why is this woman getting so much money? And again, it's not about her being a woman. It's the observational fact that she is a woman. I'd say if she was a man, I'd say, why is this man getting so much money? Alright? Don't get sexist on me. But she was a fucking failure in government. Why the fuck is she getting so much money? And what pisses me off more is, why the fuck are colleges giving her money? What? No. She should be making big donations that size to the colleges and other education establishments. What the fuck?
Friend had not read the rules or didn't understand what they meant, and others around him.
And she's being a hypocrite by being a. I mean, don't get me wrong, I loved her for this, but taking on Boris Johnson when he was a fucking being a hypocrite,
Or they didn't think the rules applied to number 10. Which was it?
This is what the former Prime Minister wants you to see. Out of office, but still upholding standards and holding her successors to account. But away from the Commons, a packed and lucrative schedule. Since leaving number 10, Mrs May has earned 10 times her MP's salary, giving dozens of speeches to a host of different audiences, from American banks to the Danish legal profession. £113,000 for a speech to a scientific conference, £136,000 for an address.
I'm sorry, but what the fuck has Theresa May got to add to the field of science? What the fuck? Was she funding a project? Apart from that, why the fuck is she making a speech? Scientific what? What? Would someone tell me what this woman can actually add to our knowledge in science, please?
To the World Knowledge Forum, a former Prime Minister in huge demand.
Why?
Even in countries which she took on as Prime Minister. It was the murder of activist and journalist Jamal Khashoggi in 2018 that made Theresa May a firm critic of Saudi Arabia.
I can update the House that no minister or official is attending the investment conference in Saudi Arabia.
As well as demanding answers, she blocked her ministers from visiting the country for a conference.
Thank Lady Theresa May for her time and to thank the Kingdom for welcoming.
4 years on, and a very different approach, it seems.
What a hypocrite.
The rich diversity of cultures, religions and beliefs.
The former PM on stage herself in the capital of Saudi Arabia at a travel conference, telling the audience it was a pleasure to be in Riyadh and being paid £107,000.
The soggy murder had never
For
happened.
almost 2 months, Sky News has been trying to get Theresa May to talk about her outside earnings.
She's not gonna,
Our
mate.
office acknowledges receipt of our questions, but the promised reply never comes. This is Theresa May's constituency office. We're just going to knock on the door. We went on a Friday, when MPs are typically in their constituencies, to get answers that way, but no luck. It is a shame that Theresa May isn't here, because she says that the money that she earns goes into this, a company called the Office of Theresa May Limited. Here are the accounts. And that she pays herself a salary of £85,000 a year from this company, and the rest of the cash goes to support her charitable work and to pay for other activities as a former Prime Minister. But looking at these accounts, it's just not quite clear how that works. The cash seems to come into this company, but it's not clear where it goes from there, and now we can't ask Theresa May what's going on. We know Theresa May is involved in charitable work, but under this system, we just can't.
I get why he's doing this. He's trying to back his argument. He's trying to back his and Tories Media's argument up for doing this in the first place, because he knows that this is this sort of thing is going to cause a huge uproar, especially with the many Tories that are on that list. But it's not supposed to be there to make a scandal. It's there for us to have the information. These people are supposed to be accountable to us, the public. And they say, they you know, people say, Starmer and everyone will say that, you know, it's already public. It is. This is true. But most people don't understand the jargon that it's put under. This helps.
The money goes.
All it is a tool. Fucking adverts. But yeah, all it is a tool. And you can't blame the tools, you can only blame the user.
Head constituents willing to make up their mind without the answers.
Oh my God, that's a lot of money. Well, I think if he's more focused on doing that than being a constituent MP, certainly would affect it. MPs should be doing their job and not getting involved in all these other things, you know?
Are you surprised people pay a lot of money to hear her speak?
Yeah, that's what I'm surprised about.
I'm surprised Matt
Theresa May, she doesn't know what's happening in Maidenhead.
Some are more supportive.
It all depends what she's talking about. If somebody wants to pay money to her, who's to say why not?
It's not just the former Prime Minister who's been declaring she's earning big sums on top of her day job. Sir Geoffrey Cox is a second MP that has declared they topped...
Withers LLP, £1.8 million. Khan Partnerships is 178 grand and a half grand. Bowser Cotton, or Bower Cotton, sorry, Bower Cotton, 100 grand. CGS Legal, 43.5 grand. Messrs HMA, 32.5 grand.
£2 million already earned in this Parliament. His
Fiddlaw, 15 grand. James, 5 grand, just over 5 grand. Britain and Time Solicitors, 2 grand. King's College London Conservative Association, just over £1 grand. Harley Solicitors, 333
for
grand.
legal work.
£33.
He says his experience as a practising barrister is invaluable to politics. And he spends no more time than the Cabinet Minister would on their job.
That you deserve to get 1.8 million.
Another former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. Since his resignation, he's become an earnings juggernaut. He walked out of number 10 in September and has already...
Hang on, 2 seconds.
She's talking about if somebody wants to pay money to her, who's this?
That works. The cash seems to... Where the money go?
MP should be doing that.
She's talking about
£1 million already earned in this Parliament. He's coming from legal work. He says his experience as a practising barrister is invaluable.
No one should be getting that much money for doing what he does.
No more time than a Cabinet Minister would on their job. Flying up this leaderboard, another former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. Since his resignation, he's become an earnings juggernaut.
Let's see his list, shall we, so far?
Out of number 10 in
So, for Boris Johnson, out of a total of £1,064,785, okay? Centreview Partners LLP, £278,722. Council of Insurance Agents and Brokers, £276,130. Hindustan Times, okay, £261,652. Televisión Independiente, 215,276 pounds.
September, and has already earned over £1 million.
And then Hodder and Stoughton UK, 27.5 grand, or just over 27.5 grand. HarperCollins UK, 6 grand. Authors Licensing and Collecting Society, £102. Editions Robert Laffan, £89.
He's hit that total with his earnings from just 4 speeches. For a single speech in New York, he was paid at a rate
which
of
means that if we look at this,
£32,500
if this was adjusted for this,
that's more than the starting salary for a British nurse over a whole year, earned in just 60 minutes work. Liz Truss, still hundreds of places below both her predecessors. Her earnings total under £1,000. Royalties for a decade-old book. Also, in the top 5, the former head of Margaret Thatcher's policy unit,
John Redwood. Total 692 grand. Income sources: Charles Stanley. He gets most of his money from Charles Stanley, which is okay. I just found Charles Stanley. Right, with over 200 years' experience, we have created financial security for tens of thousands of people with a wide range of financial planning and investment management services. And he gets over £500,000 for it. Over £500,000 for it. Really? Epic private equity. Epic? Really? 14.5 grand. Bite-sized Books Limited, 2.5 grand. Authors Licensing Collecting Society, just like Boris, 246 grand. Palgrave Macmillan Spring, 135 grand.
Former Cabinet Minister John Redwood, making big money with a big job title. As well as being MP for Wokingham, he's the chief global strategist for the investment firm Charles Stanley, declaring earnings of nearly £700,000 from the company since the last election. Here, praising the growth of video conferencing because it means he can do more.
Why is it a man who does this kind of thing, who doesn't actually physically affect anything, doesn't help any of us? It really doesn't. It helps people get their profit. That's what it does. It doesn't help any of us. As big business managers get their profit. Why does he get that much money for so little work? And yeah, I will compare it to builders, nurses, doctors. Why does he get so much money for so little work? Is his work more vital than people who collect bins? I don't think he fucking is. Is his job more vital than teachers? No, it fucking is not. So why is he earning multiples more than teachers? Why? Because of capitalism. That's fucking why.
For the firm.
Someone who is obviously part-time, I think I'm far more efficient as a result of these changes, because I can, for example, break off today and share a conference with you for an hour.
But that still doesn't mean that you should be earning stupid amounts of money for what you do. I'm sorry, just the amount of money he gets does not equate to the job he does. It really doesn't. When you think about the material, what he does what his job does for the rest of society is fuck all. It's for the rich people. And even then, you know, we should be eating into what the rich people have, not what the poor people have. But this guy just keeps getting richer. For doing fuck all. His job is not as important as doctors, nurses, teachers, fucking bin collectors. And, you know, rubbish bin men. Plumbers. Electricians. Builders. This man is not as important as they are. And yet, he earns multitudes more than they do. This isn't just unfair, it's fucking sickening.
In the afternoon, whereas I wouldn't necessarily be able to do that if I had to travel an hour or 2 hours to get to it.
Oh no, what about people who've got to travel halfway across the fucking country just to do a shitty little fucking menial labouring job, you prick? It's just fucking disgusting.
Office, so I can actually do more.
Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy has been a busy man. He lists more sources of outside income than any...
It's nowhere near is that fucking last Tory though. 202 grand pretty much. Yeah. Okay. Why is he earning this much? Well, let's have a look.
Other MP.
Hang on.
For an hour at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Whereas I wouldn't necessarily be able to do that if I had to travel an hour or 2 hours to get to a given venue or an office, so I can actually do more.
Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy has been a busy man. He lists more sources...
Right, so, from the top, none of these are triple figures. Or triple figures in the thousands. None of these are six figures, okay? So, in total, it's six figures, but not one place that he earns from is over... 5 figures. Global Radio, 87.5 grand. So that's LBC. Penguin UK. So that's Alan Lane. 12 3/4 grand. MRA Search Ltd. 6 grand. Just over 6 grand. Champions UK. Just under 5 grand. Independent Talent Group. Just over 4 grand.
Of outside income than any other MP.
Deloitte, just over 4 grand. Champions Daitaku, just under 4 grand. VMware Ltd, just over 3.5 grand. We Are Creative Equals, just over 3 grand. Lloyds of London, just over 3 grand.
Receiving money from
Canary Wharf Group, just over 3 grand. NPM Live, just under 3 grand. Fund Finance Association, just under 3 grand. Facebook, just under 3 grand. Shared Interest, just over 2.5 grand.
Over 3 dozen.
Trainline, just under 2.5 grand. LexisNexis, just under 2.5 grand. GSK, just under 2.5 grand. Google, just under 2.5 grand. EY, just under 2.5 grand.
Speaking.
Deloitte again, just under 2.5 grand. Close Brothers, just under 2.5 grand. Capital One, just under 2.5 grand. Candex Solutions, just under 2.5 grand. Marks & Spencer, just over 2 grand.
To voters, yes.
IM Power, just over 2 grand. Hammerson, just over 2 grand. Finsbury Group Ltd, just over 2 grand. Aquida Ltd, just over 2 grand. SSAT, just under 2 grand.
But declaring significant...
Student Accommodation Conference... Confederation, just under 2 grand. Sum Up, just over $1.5 grand. Royal Bank of Canada, just over $1.5 grand. Novartis Pharmaceuticals, just over $1.5 grand. Forward PMX, just over $1.5 grand.
Thicken earnings at the same time.
Loyola University Chicago, just over $1.5 grand. Wilson Center, just under $1.5 grand. Blackstone, just under $1.5 grand. The Mill, just over $1 grand. Independent schools bursars, $1 grand, just over $1 grand. Tufts University, £737.
David Lammy sits at his...
Whilst that is a big list, and a lot of that I'm a bit like, there's quite a few in there also that I'm like, I wonder. Because a lot of them in that list are some decent places. Others aren't, but most of them are. And LBC, you know, he gets a voice out there for people who wouldn't usually get a voice. You know, so
Starmer's top table.
I don't approve. I don't massively approve of him, but I don't massively disapprove of him either. I'm a bit when it comes to David Lammy.
Shadow Foreign Secretary for over a year. One of the biggest jobs in the Shadow Cabinet at a time of international crisis. Mr. Lammy has juggled that role with a range of outside work, a radio show, speeches and training courses for corporations. A lengthy section on his personal website promotes his skills as a paid public speaker on a broad sweep of different topics.
We're certainly living in uncertain times.
From crisis management,
if America retreats from the world,
to US politics. And companies have clearly been taking notice. David Lammy has listed at least 30 speaking and training engagements since December 2019, worth around £100,000, as well as more than £87,000 for a radio programme on LBC. All of this hard to square with the Labour leader's firm line against second jobs.
Ban all second jobs for MPs, with very limited exceptions.
Neither Keir Starmer's team nor David Lammy's were able or willing to set out if his outside work would qualify for an exemption.
And that's because a further discussion needs to be had. A more detailed discussion needs to be had around this policy area. Because I'm pretty sure this is going to be made a policy in the manifesto. So, I can't say that for definite, but I'm pretty sure it will be. So, if it is, then what this means is that a further discussion is going, more detailed discussion is going to be needed to be had around specifically this subject, just so that we're all clear on what's what. There are going to be a bunch of people who jump on this. I've already seen a couple who have, and whilst I get there, I do understand their point of view. I don't fully agree with it because I think that they already don't like Keir Starmer. I'm not his biggest fan, but at the same time, I want Labour to be in power, not the Tories. And he's our leader. I'm a Labour member, so he's our leader. So yeah. But it doesn't mean I can't criticise cunt, because I will if I have to. If I feel like I've got to criticise him, I will. If I feel I've got to praise him, I will. Otherwise, it's usually just
I'm on a political show putting political views and putting the views of my constituents.
Mr. Lammy's office acknowledged receipt of our questions, but chose not to respond. Mr. Lammy has, however, made an impassioned defence of his second jobs on his radio show.
Why am I here? Why am I pleased to be here? Because one, I'm the only black presenter on LBC. It's important for my constituents. I love the fact that they're present and they can hear me putting views that they agree with out there into the public.
Some of his Tottenham constituents like having a visible local MP.
I think he's focused enough on the job of being a politician, yeah, and I think he's focused enough on Tottenham, even though he's...
It's because the things he's doing to get the money, these small portions of money from all these different places, what he's doing is being active, he's being out there, he's being visible. He's still being accessible to his constituents as well.
Making all this money outside. Yeah. Well, yes, because he's accessible, which I think is, it can't be said of lots of others.
For some constituents, it's not the radio show that's the problem.
Deloitte, Lloyds of London, JP Morgan Chase, Canary Wharf Group, GSK, some of those are...
Yeah, see, these were... when I saw these in the list, I was like... Why are you doing that? Why are you taking money? I mean, again, it's a case of why is he getting money from it?
are quite shocking to me. Ask why he did them, I guess, and does he agree with the practices or the values of these companies?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I will have to say, like, I read them out. It's all around £2,000 per pop. I mean, I know plenty of people down at my level that, can go out and do something he does, get £2,000, or go out and get £2,000 for doing something worse and quicker. So,
I think if that was brought up for me, it'd make me squirm a bit, probably.
A bit, but again, I think it's useful, and Sam Coates has already said that what this is useful for is to compare different MPs. So you go dig deeper and compare where he's getting the whole list of where he's getting money from, and compare the whole list of where someone like Theresa May's getting her money from. I think that's more dodgy. I think she's a hell of a lot more dodgy. Or someone on comparison with David Lammy, like Patterson, yeah, Owen Patterson. He's on that level, just a bit more, yeah. You look at the detail of it where he gets his money. It's like there's barely anything on there that's like, oh, that's okay. Well, at least with David Lammy, there's plenty of things on there where it's like, yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, that's first, why there, dude? Why there? There's a few on there I'd ask questions of, and be like, what the fuck, dude? But reading out that list and looking through, who most of they were. I mean, I know at least half of them, and majority of they were, horrible. So, yeah.
All allowed under the rules.
We're talking about thousands here. I have a problem with people who've got hundreds and hundreds of that, more than coming up to, £500,000 to £1 million or over. Why are you getting that money? David Lammy's on the upper end of okay, that's not too bad, but he's on the upper end of that. He's getting close to the border of, okay, what the fuck are you doing?
Permit MPs to do almost any second job apart from lobbying. MPs themselves often point out it's no different from being a cabinet minister. But this is an admission that, for some, being an MP is not necessarily a full-time occupation. Coming up with a single easily comparable figure for outside earnings, unlikely to go down well with MPs who could have done it themselves.
There's no incentive for MPs really to make it easy to do the sort of comparison that you've done in this exercise. It's much easier for them to say, we've been transparent, the data is out there, people can go. It's much easier for them to say
themselves.
There's no incentive for MPs.
Director of the Institute for Government, Dr. Hannah White.
Really to make it easy to do the sort of comparison that you've done in this exercise. It's much easier for them to say, we've been transparent, the data is out there, people can go and look through it if they want to, but in fact that data isn't very easy to use and it's not real transparency.
Yeah, MPs, as I said earlier, it's because he's hidden under a load of fucking jargon.
Earnings information is just one benefit of the new public tool SkyNews has commissioned from Tortoise Media. More than 500,000 different pieces of data about your MP and all MPs now able to be explored by anyone. Tomorrow, we look at donations. More findings, more league tables, only possible because of the Westminster Accounts Project. And these prompt the question, does what MPs tell us give us the whole picture?
I'm impressed.
Our pioneering research project
I'm impressed, I've got to admit. I'll give Sky News, I'll give Sam Coates and Tortoise Media their dues on this one. Again, it's not like this is a huge scandal. You can probably find scandals within this, but it's all it is all.
We'll be hearing from Sam later in the programme. We'll also have more stories from the Westminster accounts in the coming days. But now, it's time for our first interview of the new year, and it's a big one. We can talk now to the man hoping to become the UK's next Prime Minister, Labour's Keir Starmer, and find out what he would do if he got the keys to number 10. Thanks very much for being on the programme.
Good morning. Very good to be your first interview of the year.
Good morning. Yeah, it's good to have you as well. I'm keen to get to your vision, to what you would do if you were the next Prime Minister. But first, I just want your reaction to the Westminster Accounts project. Whatever your views on, political donation.
Now, is he gonna get all fucking? Oh, I don't like it. Well, we already had it transparent. I don't know why you're doing this. This is useless. We don't need this. Then we've got a serious problem coming in if he's going to be the new Prime Minister. However, if he's like, I like this. This is cool. More transparent. Yeah, this is great. Yeah, I like this. Yeah, this is cool. Yeah, then that's all good. But then you could also have the one where he goes, yeah, this is, I mean, we already put our details up. But more transparency, make it easier to understand. Fair enough. Yeah, go ahead. That actually sounds like a pragmatic mind. Someone who's taken in all details. Yes, we already do this anyway, but more transparency is always good. That's like, saying that's defensive and accepting at the same time. I don't see a negative there. Well, I don't even see it's defensive. But anyway, let's see what Starmer's got to say about it.
Nations or outside
I wonder, A, B, or C? Let me know in the comments. First, second, or third option that I won't move. What do you think what did you think you won't move? Going all defensive and or really, really accepting, or a level head.
Surely more transparency has got to be a good thing.
Transparency is a good thing. I think that you've obviously pulled together a lot of information there, made it publicly available. I think it was all in the public domain because it's all been declared according to... We've got strong rules, as you know. I think we've got some of the strongest rules in terms of what we have to declare. But, the more transparency, the better, so that everybody can see exactly what has been declared and ask whatever questions they want to about.
To me, that's the third option that I like. My third option was good there. Right? Starmer, to me, I wish he'd do be a little bit more radical, me being me, but I haven't got a problem with it, because the people he's trying to get, that he needs to get on board just so Labour can get into power, aren't so radical. However, there are things that he's been saying that I like. This panic about privatisation, I think I'm not going to give my own view, I'm not going to be definitive on that right now, because we don't know the full details yet of what him and Wes Streeting are fully on about. Wait till the manifesto, then we'll dig deep. Phil from A Different Bias said he'd do a dig deep on the manifesto when we get close to the elections. I will do the same, and I will do the same thing for the Tories, the SNP, Lib Dems, and the Greens, and possibly Plaid Cymru.
Yeah, and I think it's the accessibility. I mean, you can pull up whoever you want. Your own entry. I guess you think it's important for your own top team to be transparent as well.
Yes, I mean, I think it's fair to say that everybody is declaring in accordance with the rules that have been in place for some time. What you've done is bring that all together in one place, but it's all been declared according to the rules.
Absolutely right. I think the thing that's interesting about the project for me,
I think, again, I don't agree. Right, before I get people jumping down my back, I don't think that Phil from A Different Bias knows everything. I know he doesn't. He's got stuff wrong. However, I think he's right when it comes to Keir Starmer. He's careful. And not only that, but there's one specific thing he said about Labour in particular, or Labour as a whole, over the years. Like women in business, they have to work harder to prove they can do what the Tories wouldn't necessarily have to work hard to prove that they can do. Labour have to work harder to prove that they can be good in government. to show that they can be good in government before an election than the Tories historically have had to. That I agree with.
Anyway, is that you can have a comparison.
So, when he's saying that here, I don't think he's being defensive in a way of being against this. I think he's trying to just establish that this is not an area of corruption. This area of corruption is of potential corruption is heavily monitored. I think that's what he's trying to reinforce. I don't think many people are going to say the same thing as I am. I think what you're going to get a lot of is, he's making excuses, he's being highly defensive. I don't think he's being, that's it at all. I think all he's trying to do is establish that this area of corruption already is being heavily monitored. But he's also said that he's more than happy to see it more transparent. He's not got a problem with it.
As well, so you know what's
it's already been established
in terms of earnings and what is perhaps not. And it is also fair to say that if you're looking at the highest earners, the vast majority are Conservative MPs, nearly all. Just want to have a look. On November the 16th, 2021, you made a speech on how to improve parliamentary standards, and you said, these are the changes that Labour is calling for. First, a ban on all second jobs for MPs with very limited exceptions. And then 13 days after that speech, David Lammy becomes Foreign Secretary. You can have a look at his entry on our database. He's earned £106,000 since the 16th of November 2021, which is when you made the speech. So how is that compatible with your ban on second jobs?
Well, Sophie, what I was proposing was a system for all MPs, that we should ban second jobs. There's a discussion about what exemptions there should be. I think David, for example, does a lot of media work, and I think media work and writing books is all part of the political process. But
which I actually agree with. Well, Karl Marx's famous piece is a book. That's politics. Keynes wrote books. No, plenty of political figures have written books and got money for it, which has gone on to inspire more politics. So, again, with the media, think about what David Lammy does in the media. Where we see him, what we see him saying most of the time. I don't agree with everything he says, but the majority of what he says I agree with. And it's a lot of it's speaking out against all the bullshit that's happened over the past 10 years, 12, 13 years.
Discussion to be had.
So I think she takes this big figure, but again, look deeper and compare it to when you look deeper at Tories' big figures.
Urging was for the whole House of Commons to agree new rules, because I do think that we should get rid of second jobs, with some exceptions. Some people have jobs where they need to top up their skills. And I do think if you write a political book or, yeah, exactly, that may be grounds for an exemption. But what I still want, is for the whole House of Commons to agree new rules, which are stricter than the rules that we've got. And the sooner we can do that, the better.
So you mentioned...
Authors can educate, whether that's fantasy or not. Authors can educate. If you're... which has a material difference on the world, whether right then and there when it's published, or as it's being written, or many years later, it actually, again, I'll come back to Marx and Engels' book with the Communist Manifesto. Again, it's not something that I hold to, because I think communists are too extreme. But my point is that the Communist Manifesto is one of those political books that still has an effect. Whether that's a negative effect or a positive effect, it still has a material effect in the way that people think and then physically behave in their political life. So, yeah, I actually do agree here, when you think about it.
Some exemptions. So in your view, then, making £90,000 from a weekly radio show, as David Lammy has, would be an exemption. Or how about tens of thousands from speeches to bankers, consultants, tech firms, as he has too?
I think Parliament's got to come together and decide what the exemptions should be. But I, for my part, think the rules should be stricter. I think
but you can't say which jobs should be banned and which shouldn't.
Not right now, no.
Broadly speaking, I think that there's a million...
one thing I've got to... I'm not a non-absolutist. You guys who watch me regularly know this, right? You can't... With these questions, after these questions, she wants an absolute answer, and most of the time, the right answer is not an absolute answer. So I don't know what she's trying to get at here.
Miles of difference between someone who's, advising a company on strategy, for example, and someone who's writing a political book. But look, I'm open to a discussion on this. I think the rules should be stricter. I would like the House of Commons to come together again and have another go at changing the rules. Obviously, when we said those things, that was in the middle of some terrible rule breaking that was going on in the House of Commons. Last year was a busy year, but look, do I think the rules should be stricter? Yes, I do. Do I think it's very good that it's transparent? Yes, I do. Do I encourage the House to come together? Because in the end, it's not a party political matter. It's got to be the whole of the House of Commons. Do I want the House of Commons to come together to have another look at it? Yes. Then we can have a discussion about what the exemption should be. The narrower, the better, in my view.
So, all the absolutists out there wanting a definitive answer out of him, he's giving you an answer, but out of necessity, out of actual realism, he can't give you a definitive answer because a further more detailed discussion needs to be had on the subject. Absolutely, the people's demand for an immediate answer is ridiculous. It actually is. This modern form of capitalism has not helped with this. I want to know exactly what this is right now. No, I don't want a mixed up answer. I don't want a nuanced answer. I want a straight up answer. Well, this is the nuanced answer is the straight up answer. I can only give you what I can give you. I'm sorry, but it's not always about the simple answer, and most of the time, the simple answer ignores the largely context. It's great. You can criticise him. It's great it's good to criticise Starmer, but if you're going to take these criticisms only in isolation and not do it with context, I'm sorry, but I will have criticisms of your criticisms. Democratically possible, isn't it? That just because you disagree doesn't mean I can't disagree with your disagreement of him. I'm not a staunch Starmer defender. I'm really not, but he does think pragmatically. And a lot of people don't like that because they want him to do the things that they want him to do. That's just natural, but we do have to start being more realistic about these things. It's just true. And I won't I'm sorry, but I can't accept, he's a red Tory. No, he isn't. He's just not as radical as most of the left would like him to be.
But obviously we've got to reach an agreement and go forward from there.
Okay, thank you very much. You want to be the next Prime Minister. Right now, for many of our viewers, the number one priority is the health service.
Yes.
What is your plan?
Well, I think, firstly, we've got to acknowledge that the health service is not just on its knees, it's on its face. I think as we sit here today, there are 7.2 million people on the waiting list. Speak to anyone who works in the NHS and they'll tell you just how stressed it is. My wife works in the NHS, so I know this firsthand. So the NHS is on its face. There are immediate things that we have to do to get through this winter. But I think that bigger than that, we've got to have change and reform. Yep. We've got to make sure the NHS is sustainable, not just through this winter, but over the next 10 years. And that's why I've asked West Streeting to do our work on change and reform. And I want a 10-year plan for change and reform of the NHS. And that's what we would usher in as a Labour government.
Which we'll then have to wait to see.
what I've called the sticking plaster politics of getting through the winter crisis, but actually fixing the underlying problems and changing the NHS. So, for example, I think we need much more preventative work. We need to intervene much more quickly. And I want to see health accessible in our community. So there's big change. And I think it's for the Labour Party to do that. We set up the NHS and we will ensure the future of the NHS. But just at the moment, we've got a crisis, and it's the worst crisis we've ever had. And that's because we've had 13 years of neglect. And
worse than COVID, you think, then, the pressure currently?
Oh, if you look, I mean, of course, COVID put extra pressure on the NHS. Nobody would deny that, certainly not me, with my wife working in one of the big London hospitals. I know what stress that put us under. But the waiting lists were, 4.6 million before we went into COVID. The difficulties we've had with workforce has been there for a very, very long time. They've never been fixed by this government. So one of the first steps we would do, and we've already set out, is to get rid of the non-dom status, which allows very wealthy people not to pay their tax in this country. We'd get rid of that and use the money from that to double the number of medical students coming into the NHS. So that's the first practical step. But we've got to go much further than that. Change and reform is what is needed. We're going to consult on this in the course of the coming months, and then there'll be a 10-year plan for the NHS under the next Labour government.
You are doing the thing that some people are very frightened of doing, which is talk about private sector involvement as well. In your speech this week, you talked about the public and private sectors working in partnership. There's been a move where you want to see more use of beds in the private sector. Just explain the thinking there.
Well, the immediate problem is obviously the waiting lists, and one of the issues that we've looked at is whether or not we're using the private sector effectively. A number of people do go as NHS patients to the private sector. Our research shows that that's been underused, and we could do more of it. And that would clear, 230,000 people off the waiting list every year.
So more use of the private sector in the NHS under Labour.
Yes, but I mean, let me be clear. We're not talking about privatising the NHS. We're talking about using the private sector effectively. And free at the point of use is an absolutely governing principle as we go into this review. But we do need change and reform. I want to look, for example, at primary care. Would it be possible to use local pharmacies more to do work on prescriptions, etc.? Is there a route for self-referral? What do we do about the partnerships of GPs, which I don't think are necessarily as efficient as they should be? We're asking all the questions that a bold incoming government should ask about change and reform. Now, we want to consult, because obviously we need to test these ideas.
With the doctors' unions, that it sounds like this could provoke. You're willing to have that battle?
Yeah, we've got to have battles. I mean, I ran a public service, the Crown Prosecution Service, for 5 years as part of the criminal justice system, and I've reformed that. And my experience of reform is there will always be people who say, I wouldn't do that, I'd keep it as it is, don't touch anything. I totally disregard that. I think if there's change to be made, we've got to get on and make it. So this isn't a battle with a particular sector, but it is a statement of intent. We need to change. We need to reform. We need to make sure the NHS can survive for decades to come, and that will mean change and reform. And we're not going to back down the first time somebody says, well, I wouldn't do that, I wouldn't change this.
I just want to have a look at one of your 10 pledges during your leadership campaign to become the leader of the Labour Party. And you said this in it. You said, public services should be in public hands. Here we go. Public services should be in public hands, not making profits for shareholders. And this is the key bit, end outsourcing in our NHS. So why have you changed your mind?
Well, we're not talking about privatising the NHS or any public. Well, the NHS has always used elements from the private sector. GPs, for an example, is an example.
But your pledge, you said end outsourcing in our NHS. You've changed your mind.
Yeah, well, look, the outsourcing of some issues and functions I don't think has been very effective. But if you take the NHS has always used.
Hang on, guys. Phone calls.
Used GPs in private practice. That's always been part of it. For many, many years, the NHS has referred NHS patients to the private sector to have operations, hip operations, knee operations, etc. I think we could be more effective at that. But I'm not talking about privatising the NHS. The same is true in criminal justice. I do think it should be run as a public service. But it doesn't mean there isn't a private sector in there. Self-employed barristers, for example, from the private sector provide.
That's just it. What you want is the public service to be run by the public sector. When it comes to private service, a little bit of outsourcing. The problem with what the Tories have done with outsourcing is that they made it everything is outsourced. I think Starmer's mistake there was making again. It comes down to absolutism. He made an absolutist statement. That was his mistake. That's what I identify as his mistake. Because what he's actually talking about, again, he's right. He's not talking about privatising the NHS. What he is talking about is managing, cutting down and managing the outsourcing of the private sector. So the private sector and the public sector can work together rather than, rather like what Europe does. But it means more investment. That's the big one.
The service in criminal justice in relation to prosecutions. What I want to ensure is that our public service, which frankly are on their knees. I mean, ask yourself.
And that's just it. If Starmer went on a whole fucking renationalisation thing like Corbyn would have done, it would freak the markets just as much as trusted. So what he's going to try and do is do this in a way that won't fucking make the market shit the bed. Because you just end up with the same bullshit that fucking Truss ended up with. We don't need that.
The question is: any public service
bullshit
now better than it was 13 years ago when this government came in? And I don't think anybody with a straight face could answer that question and say yes, they're better than they were. Nor could anyone, frankly, answer the question: do you feel personally better off over the last 13 years, or is our economy better off? Almost all those questions beg only one answer, which is no.
I was quite interested earlier in the interview when we talked about the NHS, and you were saying about how your wife tells you stories about what's going on. What kind of thing did she say?
Well, probably what everybody working in the NHS. So, I mean, my sister used to work in the NHS.
There are going to be a bunch of people who go, "Oh, he's hiding. He's hiding." No, because when it comes to the private stuff they say to each other. If he's going to say the same stuff as what everyone else is saying, then that's fair enough. Like if he doesn't go into details, that's also fair enough. Part of me wish he would, but I'm not going to get all shitty with him for not going into absolute detail here. I know that's what the journalist wants, but I can see why he answers it the way he does.
My mum works in the NHS, so I know a lot about it, and obviously a lot of people we know work in the NHS, but it's completely under strain. One of the big issues is workforce, and that's why it's very important that we made that commitment, end non-dom status, use that money to train up the next generation of medical staff.
Pay as well, because people say pay is a big factor.
Yes,
we've got the strikes, of course, as well. The leader of the Royal College of Nurses suggested this last week that her members would accept a 10% pay rise. Would you agree to that?
Well, look,
I really wish journalists would stop asking, "Oh, would you go for this specific number?" They're not the ones in it, especially when it's Labour. They're not the ones in the negotiations. Not only that, but it's all about getting into negotiations. It's highly likely that they probably would, but that's not what. It's not the job of the politicians to come out there and give exact numbers, which could then be reneged later. Look how stupid that kind of shit happened with Boris Johnson.
Let me tell you the approach we would take, because I think many people...
We know you'd get around a table and negotiate, but what kind of pay rise would you...
Let me just...
Again, it's not for Labour to say what they wouldn't give when they're not even at the table. If they did, and then they got into power and then didn't, can you imagine how they'd be destroyed? Think about it from a bigger picture sense.
Walk through, and I'll obviously answer your question, don't worry about that, but just walk it through. The nurses have never ever had a national strike before, ever. They don't want to be on strike. And it's a badge of shame that for the government that we're even in this situation. All they're asking for is the government to get in the room and negotiate with them. And they said that before the strike...
Well, they're asking for more money, aren't they?
Before the strike started, in that week before the strike started, they said, if the government comes into the room to talk to us, we won't go on strike. And the government has refused to do so. If we were in government, we would go in the room and discuss. We would have taken up that offer. So the hypothetical you're putting to me, what would you do if you were in government? Yes, we would roll up our sleeves, we would go in and we would talk to them and we'd resolve this issue. Just add two other bits to this. Firstly, there never was a national strike under the last Labour government. 13 years, no national strike.
I do want to go back to the question, which the pay is key, isn't it?
Of course, pay is key.
Would you agree to a 10% pay rise for nurses?
There's going to have to be compromise on both sides. I'm not going to sit here answering a hypothetical about the situation. You're asking me what would I do in government. If I was in government, I'd go into the room and negotiate. But equally, Sophie,
that's what they're doing next week, isn't it?
If I was in government, I wouldn't come on your show and say in advance of that what percentage, might be a compromise, what we would discuss.
I've been wishing for someone to actually say that on Sky, on BBC. And the fact that the leader of the opposition is actually coming out and saying this, I've been saying this for ages. Stop asking this question when they can't answer it. And then try to judge them when they don't answer it because there's a question that they can't answer because they're not the ones doing the negotiating. Not only that, but as Starmer just fucking said, you wouldn't expect them to come out and give them the exact numbers of what's going to be in the deal anyway. Largely because that would be unfaithful to the other side of the deal. That would actually be unfaithful to the workers. But oh no, no one thinks like that.
Any more than the trade unions would. So I wouldn't expect the government to come on your show and say this is the percentage. I would expect the government to come on your show and say yes, we'll get in the room with the nurses and we'll bring this strike to an end.
Exactly.
Okay. And now you made a big speech this week setting out your vision for the country. What's the most important message from it, do you think, that viewers should take away?
I'm sorry I didn't do... I'm going to try and bring out a video of his speech. Yesterday? Day before? And then try to do a comparison for Sneaky Sunak's speech.
Look, we need hope and change. After 13 years of failure, we need hope and change. We need a decade of national renewal, and that is what we will bring about. Growing the economy, restoring our public services, and making sure that people have much more of a say and influence over the decisions that affect them.
Now, in the speech, you appropriated the language of Brexit. You said that you were the man to take back control. So you said this, you said...
It's a bit awkward, I know, but... This is about the target voters. I wish he wouldn't have to do this, but if he feels he's got to do this, then he's got to do this.
As I went around the country campaigning for Remain, I couldn't disagree with the basic case so many Leave voters made to me. So, is that why you led the campaign for a second referendum? You said that you'd vote Remain in a second referendum, and you described the Leave vote as catastrophic for the UK. You said all that because you agreed with...
Yes, but we've now left. And it's not like going straight back into it would be possible anyway. Again, it's absolutism. I'm sorry, Sophie Ridge is just like the rest of the news, is susceptible to absolutism, which is not realistic.
Well, Sophie, what I said in my speech is something I've said actually many, many times. I've always I voted Remain. I'm not going to, and I campaigned for...
And then campaigned for a second
referendum. I voted for Remain. I campaigned for Remain.
And the second referendum.
We lost the referendum. But deeper than that, beyond the technical question, should we be in the EU or not, I felt that bound up in that referendum was a big question about change. People desperately wanted...
Yes, there was this whole thing of should we be in the EU or not, but at the same time, it also wasn't. There was this big thing of it was actually one big massive protest vote.
change. That's why I think Take Back Control was such a powerful slogan in a way. It was a Heineken phrase. It got inside people, and if you can't make your household budget balance, you don't feel you've got control. If you don't feel that you can send your child to a school that is excellent in your area, because there isn't a school that's excellent, you don't have control. If you feel that antisocial behaviour means you can't go out in your neighbourhood after dark, you don't have control. That powerful case for change, over and beyond the question of EU membership, was always that. I've always actually accepted that. I think most people who voted Remain would accept that as well.
Yeah, but I guess a lot of Leave voters will say, you know, they voted Leave because they want to leave the EU. If you're honest,
I think there was more in that vote than yes, of course.
Again, this is absolutism. No, it was just about it. No, it was a multi-layered problem. This whole Brexit bollocks is multi-layered. Trying to just say it was just about leaving the EU, for a lot of people it wasn't. For a lot of people it was about giving the Tories and the establishment as a whole a bloody fucking nose.
If you're honest, do you think your shifting message is because the electorate that mattered to you at then was a pro-Remain party membership who'd be voting for the next Labour leader? The electorate that matters to you now, when you're promising to take back control, are those swing voters, many of them who voted for Brexit. Are you changing your message to suit your own purpose?
No, Sophie, I've long reflected on that 2016 referendum, as I've reflected on the Scottish referendum in 2014, where a large number of people voted yes. So, of course,
I like the acknowledgement here. A lot of people voted yes in the Scottish independence referendum. And Tories like to brush over that, but I like how I actually approve of what Starmer is saying here.
Technical question on the ballot paper was membership of the EU or independence in Scotland. But sitting behind that, I think there was a very powerful emotional case for change, which I don't think most Remainers would argue with. I certainly didn't. I've always argued that the other side of Brexit is delivering the change that's needed in this country.
Well, let's talk about
that's what I was setting out in my speech just earlier this week.
Let's talk about some of the changes that people wanted. Immigration, a big part of the Take Back Control message for many people, and obviously a big political issue now was small boats and also record levels of immigration. So 1.1 million people arrived in the UK in the last year. Is that too low or too high?
Well, look, Sophie, I'm not going to get into a numbers game.
But that is the correct fucking answer.
We need fair rules, firmly applied, and we need to distinguish between the different reasons that people come to this country. Some people come to join their families. I think, broadly speaking, most people accept that that's
a majority of people.
Perfectly all right. A number come as students, and I want the best students from across the world to come here. Some arrive as refugees, including from places like Afghanistan and Ukraine, and obviously we welcome them as we always have done, and some come to work. Now, what I've said in a speech I did earlier, in fact at the tail end of last year, is that when it comes to those coming to work, of course, we recognise and welcome the contribution that everybody who comes to this country makes. But what I've said to the CBI is we need to wean ourselves off.
Yeah. I've heard other speeches he's made, right? And he wasn't as absolute as I've heard a lot of left-wing commentators say that he was. Like, he's speaking down about immigration. He's not speaking down about. All he's saying is that we need to put more investment into training British people up. Now, the Tories have now given us a points-based system. The point at this point, the best thing Labour can do at the moment, if they come into government, is to make that as favourable to immigration as possible. This means setting up processing centres, possibly in France. Having experienced people do that. Training people to do that job. This is create loads of jobs. This is something the Tories can't be bothered to do.
This sense that rather than skill up and train people in this country, we can simply bring people in from other countries. I don't think that's right.
again, this is an absolutism that people who criticise what he's just said. He doesn't want to continue to just rely. Take everything he just said. He doesn't want to just rely on foreign workers. Just rely. He did not say, I don't want to rely on foreign workers. I'll rewind this bollocks.
Coming to work, of course, we recognise and welcome the contribution that everybody who comes to this country makes. But what I've said to the CBI is we need to wean ourselves off this sense that rather than skill up and train people in this country, we can simply bring people in from other countries. I don't think that's right. I think that we can do far better.
Okay. Paraphrasing him then. But that doesn't. What he didn't say is that we're not going to bring people in from abroad. That's not what he said. What he's emphasising is training people in this country. There's a big difference. There's actually a difference here. But people's absolutist bias will not let them get past this. Oh, he's being a red Tory, swinging to the right. Yes, he's appealing to swing voters, but the way he's doing it is actually really sneakily and very intelligent. It is not as bad as you think. I'm not going to be a savant about this. I'm not going to be a clairvoyant about this. But he's not being as absolute. He's not being as bad as you think. This isn't as bad as you think. It's not just saying we're going to get, we're just going to completely stop taking in foreign workers. That's not what he's saying. I wish people on the left would stop doing that. That doesn't help our situation. Doesn't help Labour's situation when they finally do get into power, does it?
On the skills in this country.
Don't get me wrong. Criticise him. I will criticise him, but don't apply absolutist bias because it's not realistic.
I think there's room for fair rules, for firmly applied, and for a national debate about what we want from immigration.
One of the reasons,
and as the longer Brexit goes on, the worse the Tories make it, the more people are going to think, oh, free movement wasn't half so bad. And what he just said, he wants to have a conversation about what our immigration system looks like moving forwards. If people are more favourable to free movement, then it can be aligned more towards that. These rules can be loosened. But this is the point. It's having a discussion with the people about this. Chucking different ideas out. See what works. Rather than going, nope, we're going to do this one thing to the exclusion of all other things. And no, this thing's the right thing. Despite the fact it's a pile of shite.
I'm keen to get your view on this is because it feels to me that you have shifted, I guess, on immigration again in the last few years. So in the leadership campaign, we can see on one side of the screen, one of your pledges was to defend free movement as we leave the EU, a leadership pledge in 2020. And then compare that to a Mail on Sunday interview. Freedom of movement is a red line for me. It won't come back under my government.
These
are diametrically opposed.
Of course they're not. Look, defend free movement as we leave the EU. Right, we've left.
As we leave the EU.
No, so now we've got to face the future we're in. We're out of the EU.
Now we're out of the EU. He said we defend free movement as we leave the EU. I think the big point of that is it ties into what I was just saying about as the conversation moves forward, as Brexit makes our lives worse, as we're starting to see how bad things are. It is entirely possible within the next year and a half or so, till the next general election, that attitudes will shift more to perhaps free movement wasn't so bad. And again, whilst it won't be as it was, and it won't be even if, all the left-wingers get their way, it won't be, because of reality. Starmer can, at the very least, align with those sort of policies. Make our system so that it's not so strict as the Tories want it. Yeah? Don't be absolutist.
Free movement has gone. So the question then comes, well, what do you want now? Do you want to go back, or do you want to have a different system?
We can't actually go back. I'm sorry, Max. Most of the things that you say, I fully agree with you on. But we can't just go back. And even if we did, even if it was possible if Labour were to come in and immediately go, yeah, let's try to rejoin the EU. The EU still won't have us back straight away. Because it needs all of the political parties to be on board, and the Tories just aren't. Unless the Tories are absolutely destroyed and have no impact whatsoever on political discourse in this country, which actually it would be kind of democratically a bad thing, then we're not going to get that. So we have to deal with the reality we have. We can't just go back into free movement. We can't just go back into the EU. That's not how it's going to work. What Starmer and his government would have to do, and his new incoming government will have to do, is slowly work towards realignment with the EU. He'll say about red lines and shit now, yes, that is somewhat dishonest. However, he's trying to be realistic here with the current situation. This is things that people really need to get.
With fair rules, etc.
This is as we leave the EU.
As we leave. Defend it as we leave. Try and make sure the idea is stuck in the people's head that free movement was a good thing. Right? Now we've left, it's, this is freedom movement is a red line because it's gone. Like, how are we supposed to bring back free movement without severe policy change and major agreements and a whole renegotiation with the EU, which would take years, and other countries? It would take years. It actually would. And Labour want to get on with actual change when they come in. A lot of this stuff will have to be put off to see a second parliament. We can't just expect them to be able to do it. So again, it comes down to an absolutist mindset. We need to be a little bit less expectant and absolutist. Labour have to deal with a lot of damage, and it means some hard truths. It really does. It means uncomfortable things that are going to have to be done to try and put us back to a position before the Tories came in 12 years ago.
But this is acknowledging that we're leaving the EU and saying that you'll be defending free movement as we leave.
But we've left.
And he did. He did defend free movement as we left the EU. But we're not in the EU anymore. This is, again, it's not like I'm being absolutist here. I'm not. This is just the facts. Like, he said, defend the free movement as we leave the EU, which he did.
We've left, and therefore free movement.
Exactly.
Free movement was part of the package for being a member of the EU. Inevitably, we've left. Free movement has come to an end. Therefore, a different question arises, which is, what immigration system do you want now?
Exactly.
And I think we should have a fair system with fair rules that are firmly applied, and that's what we would devise.
So it's nothing to do with the fact that in the leadership campaign you were pitching to pro-Remain Labour members, and now you're again looking at those swing voters, many of them who voted Brexit. If you don't like my principles, I have others. It's nothing to do with that.
I think, Sophie, I mean, it's obvious what that pledge was as we leave the EU. We've left the EU. We've got to face the future as it is. But I see this, the other thing that I said, we did lots and lots of speeches and hustings, material.
Lots of things that you said. There are other pieces of that pledge that I would challenge. Why why aren't you fully backing PR? But again, it does also come down to parliamentary time in the first government. If he's only in the first parliament, if he can only get, imagine if he's only able to get one parliament's worth of a government, and at the next election after that, it'll switch again. He needs Labour to make changes, not sift through, he's only get a certain amount of parliamentary time to deal with all this in one parliament.
Materials in that leadership campaign, my overwhelming pitch to the Labour Party was, we have to win the next election, otherwise none of the things we're talking about are coming to pass.
I do
and
remember him saying.
We've lost elections consistently since 2010. I'm determined that that won't happen again, and that's why I set myself, when I became leader of this party just under 3 years ago, 3 tasks. The first was to change the Labour Party. When you lose as badly as we did in 2019, you don't look at the electorate and say, what were you doing? You look at your party and say, we're going to change, and we've been really clear about the change that we've brought about within the party, whether that's anti-Semitism, whether that's NATO, whether that's our relationship.
Got to admit, this is the anti-Semitism thing is one area that I'm a bit like about. Largely because I'm anti-Abrahamic. I'm anti-Christian, I'm anti-Jew, and I'm anti-Islam. I just am. Like, as a pagan. Because each of them have persecuted my people on a religious background, on a religious basis. Treated us like villains because we don't believe in what they believe. History of it. And now and I've experienced it in the modern day. It's not just a historical thing. As a pagan, I've experienced abuse by Christians and Muslims. Not necessarily Jews, but both of them come from Judaism. So it does get looked in. And, I'm sorry, but Zionism is not good. And some of the things that Starmer's done when it comes to anti-Semitism, I'm a bit like, hang on a minute, mate. That's not right. No, you can't kick people out for saying that they're against that they're against Israel. There's a difference between being anti-Israel and being anti-Jew. There is a difference. Some people in Israel might not think that, but that's the reality. And you've got to treat it as a reality rather than people's own opinions.
With business. The second thing is we have to expose the government as not fit to govern. Well, you can see what 13 years of failure has done. The next stage is to lay out the alternative. We began to do that last year, and 2023 is this chance for us to set out what a bold, reforming Labour government will do.
Let's just have a look at a picture of you this week giving your speech. If I may, you looked pretty relaxed and confident when you gave the speech. You had no jacket, you had your sleeves rolled up. Is that the look of a man who thinks he's going to be the next Prime Minister?
I hope so, yes. What I was doing there was setting out the case for 2023 for...
Yeah, I will do a video on his speech as well as Sneaky Sunak's. I've got to admit, Starmer's was a lot better. Yes, there were the technical difficulties, which is a bit embarrassing, but what he had to say, I liked a lot more than what I heard coming out of Sneaky Sunak's mouth. So, yeah.
For hope for change and the sort of bold change government. We need a decade of national renewal. And I think the next election is going to be about change. And, if anybody asks themselves, am I better off than I was in 2010 when this government first came in? I think the answer will be no. Are our public services any better now than they were then? The answer will be no.
I'm not going to carry on. I'm not going to carry on with this for too much longer. I'll probably do this as a two-part.
But we need change. What I want to...
It's over an hour and a half long. I'm not doing a 2-hour long video today. Yeah, I think I'm going to... When we finish with what Starmer's going to say, I'm going to finish the video, and then I'll do the second half, probably later on this evening.
do is to set out that case for change, and not just what the change will be, but also how we're going to bring it about.
Looking ahead to 2023, are you going to have time to read the Prince Harry book?
I don't know. I haven't set aside time yet.
Are you sympathetic with him? Or?
Well, my governing principle is that politics...
Again, I actually think I might do a video on what I think about some of the details coming about what Harry said about what's been going on. Part of me is like, do I really want to? But there are a couple of things where I'm like, I've got some thoughts I might want to share on this. So
politicians shouldn't wade into private matters of the royal family. I know
some private at the minute, right?
Well, but some politicians like to wade in and give opinions left, right, and centre. I actually don't, and I think it's better not to wade in.
Maybe this one then. Is 2023 the year that Arsenal are going to win the Premier League?
I really hope so. We're so tight at the top. We've got to keep going.
See, there's another thing I disagree with him on. Fucking, he's a gooner. Do one, mate.
Fantastic squad, really good team of players there. We're in a very, very good position.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party.
Right. Again, this is pretty much halfway through, and 1 hour and pretty much 36 minutes. So into this recording. So yeah, I'll leave it there for a moment. This is part 1 of my review of Sophie Ridge on Sunday from the 16th of Æfterra, the 8th of January 2023. I do hope everyone is alright. Do let me know what you think of this first part, and let me know what you think of the second part when that comes out. I put a poll up asking what people think about a change of my YouTube channel's name. Æfterra with one angry pagan in brackets, or as a secondary name, or one angry pagan. Let me know. I'm been to and fro about it for ages, so let me know. There's a poll up. Let me know what you guys think. Æfterra, one angry pagan, or both in the name. Let me know. This has been Æfterra, one angry pagan. Please like, subscribe, and comment. I want to see more people comment, please. I like feedback. Blessed say everyone, and god kveld, a good evening. Have a good one, people. Stay safe.